All right. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this very special day. I'm really privileged to be up here and to share some thoughts with you. Some of the things I heard just before really resonated with me because I think what got me here, a lot of people ask me how I was able to do all these things over the last couple of years and get to where I am today. And a lot of it has been about finding purpose. I think when you have a purpose in life and when you find something that really resonates with you, something that pulls at your heartstrings and something that gets you going every day, I think work doesn't really become work. It's just about chasing your passions and doing something that you love every day. But how did I get here? Well, I didn't always want to be a doctor. I didn't grow up wanting to be a doctor. I thought I wanted to be a pilot at one point and started flying planes when I was in high school. I had a little IT business when the dot-com boom was happening, and I did all these little things. But when I graduated high school, I actually went to school in Byron Bay. And Byron Bay was a very little town back then. Thor didn't live there, and there wasn't so much traffic. But I was able to ride my bike and just go to school and play with friends. But I didn't really have a very clear idea of what I was going to do. And my mom has always been a big part of my life. She's taught me how to drive, she's taught me how to shave, she's taught me how to do all these little things. And we actually grew up in Sri Lanka. And I think that really gave me a good idea about rural medicine there because they do a lot with very, very, very little. I got to see a lot about remote people and how they survive and how they lead some pretty productive lives with what little they have. But coming from that to here, moving to Australia, I got to see how lucky we are actually. Because we have access to free healthcare everywhere. Everyone gets a reasonably good quality of medical care, and I really got to see that after my accident. But anyway, going back, when I graduated from high school, my mom was chatting to me, and I talked to her about what I should do. And I used to get in trouble all the time. My mom's got me from the police station more than once. And I used to rarely go to school. When I got my report card once, it had 30 days absent. And my mom was like, "What do you do? Because when I go to work, you look like you're ready to go to school." She didn't know that I used to go back to sleep after she left, wake up at about 11 a.m. and drive her car around the block without a license. Anyway, so she probably thought I was going to get into a lot of trouble as an adult, and she suggested that I go to law school. And so that's what I did. I graduated from school, and I studied law. When I was going through law, something really difficult happened. Over a period of time, about halfway through law school, I started to feel a bit flat every day. This was a gradual process, and I stopped enjoying the things that I normally do. I used to love rap music and driving my car, playing my guitar, playing basketball, all those kind of things. And bit by bit, I stopped enjoying them as much. And then I started to become more and more withdrawn. I stopped going out with friends, I stayed home more, and I started to feel a bit more anxious all the time. And then I started getting panic attacks. If I was in a room full of people like this, I'd suddenly get terrified and just want to run off. That snowballed to the point where I became agoraphobic, and suddenly I was too afraid to go outside the house. And there was a period of probably weeks to months where I just locked myself away in the house, and I was just feeling edgy all the time. And it was just such a dark period in my life. People ask me if I got depressed after I had this accident. The funny thing is I haven't. And I think in my mind, I felt a lot worse back then. And I think it's really, it's isolating being a prisoner of your own mind. And I think some of these mental health issues are something that we have across our profession generally, that we probably need to do a bit more work on going forward, but it's also across the community as well. And I think it's a really hard thing to understand because you feel so alone and you feel like you can't connect. And we all know of stories of doctors who've gone down the wrong, path, been isolated, and sadly even ended their lives. So this was me back then. But for me, fortunately, in retrospect, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because it really got me thinking about my life. And I think apart from the organic medical aspect of what I was going through, I was probably just not living a life that really touched my heart. So I thought about what I should do. And at that time, my ego got stripped away and all these other things got stripped away. And I was also working at a law firm as a clerk at the time. And I thought, hey, what if I do something where I don't rip people off every day? No, I watched a lot of Grey's Anatomy. But no, I thought about what I should do with my life. My mum, she has this quote in her email signature these days. And it says that helping one person might not change the whole world, but it could change the world for one person. And at that time, this concept really touched my heart. I thought, wow, this is real. What if I could do something with my job in a career that really resonated with me, where I could help one person at a time? If I could just help one person, then my entire lifetime will be worth it. And a part of the reason for thinking this was when I was going through my own mental health challenges, I had a GP that helped me out. And, their interaction with me changed the whole world for me. It turned things around. And I thought, what if I could do that for someone? And that's what got me interested in medicine. So I thought, I want to be a doctor. So I made the decision to pursue a career in medicine. And that just changed my entire life. I started feeling a bit better about the things that I was doing. I started gradually enjoying life a bit more. And I started getting a bit more energy about my future. And I actually remember the very day that I realized things had turned around for me. I drove out of my garage and I could hear the music in my car so clearly. And the lights were bright and the sun was shining and everything smelled good. So pursuing a career in medicine turned my life around and I felt like a new man. I passed the entrance test, I passed the interview. I finally got a spot to study medicine at Griffith and I started in 2008. And from day one, I knew that I'd made the right decision. I loved everything about it. I loved what we were learning, I loved the people, I loved the patients, and everything just felt right. And I had a lot of fun. Sometimes a bit too much fun. But medical school was great. I woke up every day, and I was living on the Gold Coast at the time. I looked out the window every morning and I thought, I have the best life. Things cannot get any better than this. But then things changed for me. On the 31st of January in 2010, I went to visit my parents in the north side of Brisbane. I often used to go visit them on weekends. I'd hang out at my house, eat food, pig out, and watch TV in my boxer shorts and just recharge. But on that Sunday night, I was driving back from Brisbane to the Gold Coast. That day it had been raining, and there was that crisp smell that you get after the rain, and everything looked sharp and shiny. And I was driving along the highway at 100 kilometers per hour, perfectly normal, perfectly boring, just waiting to get home. And I saw a little black slick on the road. It was tiny, I didn't think much of it, and by the time I saw it, it was too late to avoid it. And as soon as I hit it, my car started sliding all over the road. And it slid and slid and slid and spun around. And it went up an embankment on the side of the road. And it came back down, and the nose hit the tarmac. And then the car started flying through the air, nose to tail. This was probably one of the most violent experiences that I've ever had in my life. All I could hear was the glass shattering and the metal contorting and things flying around in the cabin. But at that point, I just decided not to be scared. And I thought I'd have fun, like I was in a roller coaster. And that's what I did. When the car landed, this is what it looked like. You can see that I've been shopping that day. I don't really know what happened to the clothes I bought. Maybe the fireman stole them. But when the car landed, I looked around and it was dead silent, and I was wearing a white t-shirt, which was now red with blood. And I tried to get out of the car, and I realized that my fingers wouldn't grab the handle. And I thought that was a bit weird. And then I touched my leg, and I realized that I couldn't feel it, and I couldn't move. And that's when I felt terrified. You know, that horror that you feel when you know that your life has changed forever. So I was feeling that way, and a passerby called 000, and then a fire truck turned up. The fire truck also hit that back slick and lost control. And then they slid right past my car. But fortunately, they didn't crash, and they were able to back up. I met these firemen earlier this year, and they said that they always remember this accident because it was the first person that they attended to that could diagnose themselves with what happened. And that was the start of my experience as a patient. You know, I feel really lucky from that point in even because we've seen a lot of accidents in Sri Lanka. There are no fire trucks, there are no ambulances. Guys just get tossed into a little bike and get carried off into hospital. There are no spinal precautions, and people just end up with more injuries than they already have. And I think I'm also lucky that I was in a metropolitan centre where all these things just happen so quickly. And within a very short period of time, I was taken to the Princess Alexandra Hospital, where I was operated on promptly, and I was in an ICU that was well kitted out, and then eventually into the spinal injuries unit. The thing is, I realized that this process doesn't happen the same as it did for me for everyone else. There were people that were flown in from remote part of Queensland and even northern New South Wales sometimes, who'd had spinal cord injuries but had been waiting months and months for a bed to come up in Queensland's only spinal injuries unit. So they weren't really getting the therapies that they needed, and they weren't really getting the treatment that they needed for such a long period of time, just because they lived far away from where we are. It was a hugely difficult time being in the hospital. I was there for 8 months. And one of the things that I realized is that doctors always don't talk to their patients properly. I had some really terrible interactions. Just before I went under anesthetic, the anesthesiologist told me that he doesn't know whether I'll wake up from that. And he said that I was pretty badly damaged and he doesn't know what will happen to me. Which are really comforting words. One night I woke up in the ICU and the ICU registrar ridiculed me for asking him questions about what was happening for me. And he got really angry and said, "Hasn't anyone explained to you? You're so badly injured. You can talk to my boss tomorrow and find out a bit more." And he just took off. It felt really disempowering because after being someone who really liked having control over their life, suddenly I didn't have control over when I ate, when I could have a shower, when I could do things. In the spinal unit, I shared a room with 3 other people. One of them was from Thursday Island, and he'd been in the hospital in the hospital system for months and months and months. Some of these guys actually stay patients within the system for about 2 years. Another guy was also from a rural part of Australia. One of them had some mental health issues, and neither psychiatry or the spinal unit wanted him, which was really sad. He used to get angry every night and threaten to kill me and throw things at me. One of the other guys used to get drunk every night. One night, I woke up to him touching my leg and telling me that he was really lonely. After a period of time, my mum and I went back to Sri Lanka for the first time since I moved here. So I got discharged from the hospital, but we had a heap of challenges. We were finding it hard financially. Our family fell apart, and we had so many different challenges to deal with this spinal cord injury. So we went back to Sri Lanka and spent a bit of time there. Things didn't really get easier for a period of time. One of the things that I realized again though is how lucky I am. Is what you're seeing here is the only spinal cord injury unit in Sri Lanka. It says 2 rows of beds, and this country, Sri Lanka, also caters to a similar population as we do in Australia. I think there's something like 20 million people there as well. It's a place that's about the size of Tasmania though. And in this space, all the people with spinal cord injury from around that country end up. And that's the only space they have for doing physiotherapy and doing any kind of thing. And they pretty much sit there for over a year. When my mum and I went there, they had 1 catheter left for the entire ward. They didn't have slide boards, they didn't have some basic equipment that we take for granted. A lot of these patients, they'd go back to their rural communities because a lot of them have suffered spinal cord injuries from doing things like climbing coconut trees, which was their livelihood. And there were no support services for them, and there were no medical services for them from where they came from. Most of these patients went home and died after a couple of months. So I realized how lucky I am to be living in this place where I have so many supports and I'm not going to die just because I have a spinal cord injury. But that gave me a real insight into what disparities that we have in healthcare in 2019 around the world. And it just feels completely unfair. Throughout that whole time, though, my resolve to come back to medical school just strengthened. Because I wanted to come back and try to attend to some of these things. I wanted to try and fix some of these things. I wanted to help people that were isolated. I wanted to do research and hopefully try and change what spinal cord injury means for people. But I was also really scared because some of the disparities that happen to people with spinal cord injury as well. So there were people from my medical school that were really supportive of me coming back, but there were also people that said that it's not possible anymore. There were doctors that said that I could not come back to medical school because I wouldn't be able to examine a patient, or I wouldn't be able to do a ward round, or I wouldn't be able to do this, and I wouldn't be able to do that. And even in my own head, I had some fears about how I could make this work. How would I just function with life, and how would I be able to do all these things that a medical student does? But then I realized that, we have fears, but courage is all about just facing those fears and getting through it. And we develop courage by challenging adversity. Adversity makes us stronger. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to go back to medical school. And in 2015, I had enough people supporting me that they took me back to medical school and I could give it a shot. I passed all my exams and I got through the first year. I picked up where I left off. And I also managed to do some time at the Harvard Medical School doing a clerkship. And I was the first person with quadriplegia to be a visiting medical student there. The funny thing is, we are two developed nations, and the attitudes towards disability are completely different. Because when I told them that I had a spinal cord injury before I went there, they were actually offended that I asked that question. And they said, we absolutely have no objection to you coming as a medical student. And we are legally not even allowed to really object to that. But it's a completely different structure. Boston's also very cold, by the way. And in 2016, I graduated from medical school here. And it was a really special moment because after all those trials and tribulations, my family, my mum, my close friends, and I finally found some success and light at the end of the tunnel. And I still remember the sights and sounds and smells from that day. But that light was quickly dimmed because then I had to struggle with Queensland Health for a period of time. Because they told me for a period that I wouldn't be able to do my internship. And I got an email saying that, look, you just won't be starting your internship with your colleagues this year because of the spinal cord injury. And that was such a kick in the guts because I got good grades. I've done all these things through medical school, and suddenly they're saying that I couldn't get a job. But I think articles like this and the support that I have were very useful because I don't think people want to be embarrassed that much publicly. And so 2 days before everyone else started work, I got a job. And now it's my third year as a doctor. I always liked the idea of emergency medicine because, well, I have a really short attention span. And I think you get to do something hands-on for people every single day, which really excited me. It's challenging, it's something different all the time. And you get to be there for people through the hardest parts of their life sometimes. But I thought, how on earth am I going to work in the emergency department? Because there's been so many doubts about what I could do, and there's been, I had some doubts as well. And it's such an active area. Could I make that work? But I also found that emergency physicians are very lateral thinking people. When our radiology department told me that they would never have me work there with the spinal cord injury because it's too complicated, the emergency physician said, come and work with us and we'll give you a job. So today, we took a risk, and I've been working in the ED quite successfully. I've been independent. I see just as many patients as my colleagues. And not every patient needs a rectal exam, fortunately. And if they do, I just buy someone a coffee to do it. I think we're all going to have challenges in our lives. Things happen. But we have to see them as opportunities. You know, through the storms that come through our life, it's not about hiding when they come. It's about learning how to dance in them. It's about learning how to seize these moments as opportunities. And it's about changing our perspective for them. And that's what all these experiences really change my perception. And that's what I try to do every day. And a lot of people ask me, if you could turn back the clock, would you take this back? You know, with this time, I've had so many unique experiences. We've been able to have some impact on what's happening with spinal cord injury in Sri Lanka, something I'd never thought I'd be able to have. We've been able to change some of the ways in which doctors with disabilities are seen in Australia, and also some other professionals as well. Over the last couple of years, I've been engaged in spinal cord injury research, and recently I got a $2.1 million grant to carry through some of my work. And my dream is to walk again one day. And that's going to change things for other people too, potentially. But also, things outside medicine have inspired me. I met my beautiful, amazing girlfriend. She works in the ED as a nurse, and you know, for the longest time, I never really went outside of medicine. I was so focused. But I met her and I fell in love. And she inspires me to do more. She makes me want to pursue this research. She makes me want to be a better doctor. And just seeing those things outside of medicine has helped me as well. And if I took that time back, I wouldn't have met her, and I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be doing all the things I do. I think as doctors, and I think particularly as rural doctors, there are so many opportunities in the challenges that are there. There are so many opportunities to help people every day, and there's so many opportunities to just do things with our hands, which is such a unique thing. I think it's a privilege to have that chance to be able to make an impact. And I'd really like to congratulate you guys for taking that chance and pursuing that. I wouldn't really take this time back. And I'm really grateful for the challenges that I've had, because it's made me who I am today. And I hope that as a profession, we embrace the challenges that we have and make the world a bit better. So thank you again.